In the name of God, Creator, Pain-bearer, and Spirit of life. In this little story from Luke's Gospel, Jesus is using the request from one of his audience to step in and use his authority as a rabbi to sort out a family dispute over an inheritance. Now, that's a situation which is particularly common now, as obviously it was back in the first century. He turns this plea to intervene in a family dispute into an exhortation to his listeners to get their life priorities in order. In this parable, the wealthy farmer is maybe unkindly referred to as a fool, one would have thought, maybe, as we read this. A man who has made a very big mistake regarding his life and his property. So what's wrong here? What's the problem? Now, a parable, which this is a story apparently from real life that conveys a very clear message. Usually it's a moral exhortation. So we need to ask ourselves, what is the real message that Jesus is trying to convey here to his hearers? What is this farmer's error? Where has he gone wrong? He is not portrayed as being wicked. That is, he's not gained his wealth illegally or by taking advantage of anyone else. Furthermore, he's not even portrayed as particularly greedy. Indeed, he seems to be somewhat surprised by his good fortune as he makes what appears to be reasonable plans to reap the abundance of this harvest. What's wrong? We might therefore ask about building larger barns to store away some of today's bounty for a potentially leaner tomorrow. Well, the answer seems to be nothing. Nothing is wrong, except for two things. First, notice that the farmer's consistent focus throughout the conversation he has with himself. What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, eat, drink, be merry, relax. The constant use of the first person pronouns I and my betray a preoccupation with self. It's all about me. There's no thought of using the abundance of his windfall to help others. And there's no expression of gratitude for his good fortune. Is his good fortune a direct result of his own intensive and heroic efforts? Well, apparently not, as he is surprised by the result of his normal work and his normal preparations. He fails to understand that this great windfall has come from nature, from God. In his musings, he gives no recognition of God's part in this at all. The farmer has fallen prey to worshipping the most popular of gods. It's the unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. This leads to, and is most likely caused by, a second mistake. He's not foolish because he makes provision for the future. No. He's foolish because he believes that by his wealth he can secure his future. Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. The parable of the rich fool illustrates simply and memorably the futility of choices made in isolation from the love of God and the consideration of, and dare say I love, of neighbour. It reflects a central theme in Luke and in Jesus' preaching. That is, the problem of wealth in the context of the Christian life, where closeness to God is life and attachment to and sole focus on things reflects soul-stifling anxiety and fear. Now, whatever our technological advances over the millennia, whatever our intellectual prowess or cultural achievement, each of us and the human race as a whole remain contingent, vulnerable, fragile beings. We have to admit that. Human life, for this reason, is fraught with uncertainty and insecurity. And perhaps for this very reason, we're tempted to strive for a measure of security and control over the vagaries of life. And we do this somehow naturally through our own efforts or accomplishments. The farmer is called fool because of neither his wealth nor his ambition, but rather because he accords finite things infinite value. He has tried to insulate himself from fate and fortune through productive farming and adequate finances, and he's come up empty. He has all he believes he wants and more. Yet at the end, which comes that very night, it proves totally inadequate. Now, the false promise that we can meet our deepest needs materially has been embedded so deeply in our culture that all too often our response to disappointment with material goods is to go out and shop some more. We need to stop for a moment and reflect on the many experiences of travellers from what are termed first world countries like Australia to third world or developing countries. How often have we heard the stories of extravagant hospitality, of visitors being pressed to accept a meal or even accommodation from a family which by our Western standards are living in dire poverty? It's really embarrassing. Why does this happen? Where does this generosity come from? Perhaps because those who are poor are less insulated from death. They have fewer illusions about the efficacy of material goods to save us or to transform us. A simple question that comes from this then is material abundance a bad thing? Starts to sound like it might be. Can our wealth secure us a relative degree of comfort? Certainly, of course it can. Can it grant to us confidence that we are worthy of love and honour and in right relationship with God and our neighbours? Certainly not. Only as we recognise that the gifts of ultimate worth, which are dignity, meaning, relationship, gifts, these are gifts offered freely by God. Can we hope to place our relative wealth in perspective and be generous with it toward others? Because that's where this farmer failed. As I said, it was all about me. What's good for me? What benefits me? not how can I use this abundance to help someone else who is struggling, who might be in desperate need. According to the gospel, we might well have varying degrees of understanding, varying theologies, different ideas. But when we see the life and work of Jesus of Nazareth, the bottom line is definitely what we do with our lives. Do we acknowledge and give thanks to God for our privilege and comfort? Do we openly and generously share our wealth with those in need? If we can honestly answer yes to these questions, then we can clearly stand in the world as Christians. Of course, if we simplify this whole point, we can distill it into one simple word. That is love. Again, I come back to that one word, love. Knowing that sort of love is knowing God within us. May the Lord be with you. Amen.